We're going to talk about the data validation and data sanitization, which is a very important topic and it's extremely important for all websites. However, today we're going to talk specifically about WordPress, data validation and data sanitization. So what is this data validation and data sanitization? So let's talk about it. All right. So data validation is actually the process followed to make sure that the data we receive is what we expect to receive before saving it into the database. So for example, if you go to a website and they have a form with some input fields like username, user email address, etc. Okay, and so it's extremely important that when user enters something, that we validate it before inserting into our database. Okay, we are going to talk about why it is important, but let's just understand what are these terms actually. So like I explained to you, data validation is actually the process that we take to make sure that the data we receive from the user uh, is what we expect, and it doesn't contain any unwanted characters. It should be what we expect to receive before saving into database. Okay, and data sanitization is basically the process to clean uh, or filter the data by escaping it before we echo it to the browser or store into database. Okay, so if it contains any unwanted characters or like script tags and things that we don't need, then we go ahead and escape it. We don't take it, we reject that part, and we just only take those parts that we need. Okay, so what is the difference between the two? What is the difference between data validation and data sanitization? So data validation, we reject the data if it is not valid, and we ask the user to give us the new data uh, and the correct data basically. But in data sanitization, we don't reject the data, we just strip out the evil tags and encode it or escape the tags before echoing it to the browser or inserting into the database. So for example, if user has some we've given user different input fields like his name, his email address, and then there is a text area in which he has to write the review about a post or about something. Now the name and the email address is pretty small, right? So he can go ahead and re-enter it, but we can't ask the user to go ahead and type the whole review. Probably he might have written like 10-15 lines. We can't ask him to write those things all over again. So those are the time when we use data sanitization. So in data sanitization, what we do is we go ahead and escape all the unwanted script tags. So for example, he was writing a review and accidentally he entered some unwanted characters or script tags that we didn't need. So in that case, we'll not ask him to write it again. We'll just sanitize that data by escaping the unwanted characters and just taking everything else that is secure. Okay, so this is the main difference between data validation and data sanitization, that data validation will be used at generally at the places where we can reject the data and it's a small data that we asking like his name or email address. He can re-enter it, but not for the long ones. Okay, so in data validation, we reject the data if it is not valid and we ask the user to input it again. And in data sanitization, we don't reject the data, we just strip out the unnecessary items in the data, and then we just take the rest of it before echoing it to the browser or inserting into the database. Okay, brilliant. Now, let's see. And it is important that you should always validate or sanitize the all the inputs and escape all outputs. So all the inputs that you get from the user, you need to validate or sanitize them, and all the outputs that you do on the browser, etc., then you need to escape it or sanitize it. You should escape the data right when you're outputting it or inserting into the database, and not everywhere or at the start. Okay, so if you go ahead and try to sanitize the data at the start, and if somebody else is looking at that code of yours, he may not know, or he cannot be sure that that data is actually safe and doesn't require further sanitization later. So it is important that you sanitize the data or escape the data at the point of when you are inserting into the database or when you are outputting it to the browser. Okay, right when you're outputting, you go ahead and sanitize it there itself. Okay, cool. So why do we need to validate and sanitize? Must be wondering, why do we need to do this? I'm sure you have, uh, the answer in mind, that the main thing, the main reason why we are sanitizing and validating is to prevent the hackers from injecting various scripts, which is called SQL injection. So SQL injection is basically when user goes ahead and tries to enter some scripts into our input fields of our form. For example, it writes 1 is equal to 1, which is equal to true, or it puts some star or some unwanted scripts which allows the user to get access to the database and print out the username and password, and which is not really secure. So that is SQL injection. So we want to stop that. Don't want the hackers to use the SQL injection to get the important data of the user. And then the next is the CSRF, which is called, which is pronounced as CSRF. So CSRF is a way of attacker to use your logged in session to perform an authorized action that you didn't intend to do. Okay, so sometimes the hackers can find a way to get access to the logged in session that you were logged in at, and then perform the actions which only you are authorized to perform, and you never intended to do that, but they are able to do it. So that's CSRF, and we can stop the CSRF attack by using WP nonce field. So nonce is basically a random number. We pass this into our input field, and then the place where we are actually processing this data or inserting into a database, that is the place where we verify it, whether it was the same nonce that was there in the input field that we have received. Okay, so WP nonce field is the function is used to set up the nonce, and to verify it, we use the check admin referrer to validate the backend whether it was a same nonce number or not. Okay, and then there is cross-site scripting, XSS. So cross-site scripting is basically a type of computer security vulnerability typically found in web applications, and cross-site scripting enables attackers to inject client-side scripts into web pages viewed by other users. Okay, so for example, your friend sends you a link saying that this is a pretty cool plugin that I found, or some other third party people send you, and then you just click on that link, and then it directs you to some other sites, and perform certain actions like accessing your database, getting the username and password of the users, and then finally you land up into onto some other sites like Google or something. So three or four things happened when you clicked on that link, and that is actually getting the data from your database. So this is cross site scripting, wherein the attackers try to attack the server by getting the information from the server. Okay, by injecting the client side scripts into the web pages. All right, so we need to avoid that as well. All right, so these are the main three things, which is SQL injection, CSRF, and cross site scripting. We need to prevent the hackers to use these methods to you break our security. Okay, so that's why you validate and sanitize. The next is avoid breaking the output of the website. Sometimes the use of single or double quotes may break your site's output. That's why we need to validate and sanitize. So there are some functions available which allow us to go ahead and take care of this issue. And the last but not the least, to avoid the spread of malware. Okay, so basically, to keep our website secure, we use the validate and sanitization methods. And think about it, if you're developing a plugin or a theme, user is keeping the trust in you, and using your theme and plugin. So it is extremely important for us to keep that trust by ensuring we give them a very safe a way of dealing with the data that they provide to us. So that's why it is important that we validate and sanitize the data. All right, cool. So I think we have already discussed the differences between the sanitization and data validation as well. Okay, and we'll just go through these terms one by one now. Okay, So data validation should be performed as early as possible before performing any actions. And validation can be performed by using JavaScript on the front end and by using PHP on the back end. Okay. So a few things that you do generally during validation is that you check if the required fields have not been left blank, if the entered phone number only contains numbers and punctuation, if the number the user is entering is should be non-negative, uh, the entered postcode should be a valid postcode, the quantity field should be greater than 0, so things like this. So there are a lot of built-in functions, PHP functions for data validation, like you have is set and empty for checking whether a variable exists and it is in blank. Then you have PHP functions like mb underscore string len to check that a string has expected number of characters. Then you have preg match and string pause for checking the occurrence of certain strings and other strings. You have count to check the count of items in an array. You have in array to check whether an item exists in an array or not. So these are the PHP functions, and you have WordPress core functions. WordPress provides these set of functions for data validation. Is email checks whether it's a valid email or not. Term exists check whether the tag category or taxonomy term exists or not in the database. Username, if username exists or not. um, at this point, I want to highlight that whenever you're developing a plugin or a theme, it's important that whenever you are writing any functionality that you're giving to the user, you make sure you use current user can function that's provided by WordPress, because there might be some functionality which you don't want to allow everybody to use. There could be some functionality limited to the user rights. So the current user can function takes a parameter that I think there should be some rights or something. So whatever rights you want to give it to him, just check that condition if current user can, and then go ahead and provide the functionality. Then there are functions like is user logged in, so you can check that function because there might be certain set of actions you don't want everyone to perform, and only if the user is logged in should be able to perform those set of actions, and he should be authorized to access certain data when he's logged in. Okay, and then you have validate file function, which checks the path if it's a correct path for the uh, file entered, but it doesn't check whether the file exists, just checks if an entered file path is a real path. Okay, that's pretty much about it. And then you have data sanitization. So I've already explained, escaping is the process of securing output by stripping out unwanted data like malformed HTML or strip tags, preventing this data from being seen as a code. So whenever you're outputting the data, remember I explained to you at the beginning that all the inputs should be validated and sanitized, and all the outputs should be escaped or sanitized. So whenever you're outputting data, make sure you escape it. Okay, outputting basically printing on the browser, etc. Right. So there are certain set of you know built-in sanitization function that the WordPress provides. So this is a sanitization series of function which begin with sanitize. I'll discuss them one by one in a moment. And then you have escaping the output using escape set of functions. You have escape attribute, escape JS, URL, etc. Then these are for the translation and echoing the value, etc. Then you have the database functions for doing the WordPress query. So I will talk about them one by one. All right. So I've made the chart, I've made a table which actually show you the difference between the two, which is data validation and data sanitization. Talks about the definition, and it gives you different set of functions that data validation provides and different set of function which is required for data sanitization as well. So I think we've already discussed these set of functions for data validation, all of this. I think we haven't discussed the balance tags and force balance tags and array map. So balance tag basically returns the balance tags by applying ending returns to HTML if the user has not done so. So if a user writes like li tag and then writes something inside of it but doesn't end the tag, doesn't use the ending tag, balance tag will automatically put that for us. Then you have array map, which basically passes each item of the array to a callback function and returns the new array with the modified values. Then there are certain set of functions for data sanitization. This is sanitization series of functions. Sanitize email, strips out all characters that are not allowed in email address. Sanitize a file name by replacing space and consecutive dashes with a single dash, removes illegal special characters. So I'm not going to go into detail of each of these functions yet. There will be a separate video that will talk about each function, and it will also give you examples how to use them. Then there is escape set of functions, which is to escape the output. This escape HTML escapes the HTML blocks and display the HTML uh, with the content, but it doesn't render it. Okay. Then you have escape URL, which is basically used for output purposes. It escapes the URL and display the HTML content of the URL instead of rendering it. Escape URL raw is used when you're storing into a database, and escape URL is used when you're just outputting the URL. Then there is escape JS, encodes the text when using JavaScript. Escape attribute escapes the HTML attribute. Text area escapes text area values, and so on and so forth. Then I'm coming back to this one, which is WPDB set of methods. So I'll explain to you what this is. So WordPress provides us with a class called WPDB, and it gives us a set of functions which allows us to perform query onto the WordPress database. And as you can see, these are the set of functions: get row, get var, get result, update, insert, prepare, all of these functions, and there are more as well which you can check. These set of functions are provided by the WordPress class WPDB. Now, you don't need to instantiate the class in order to access these functions, because WordPress has already done that for us. WordPress provides us with a global variable called WPDB. Now, this WPDB global variable uh, already contains all the methods of the WPDB class, because it's already instantiated. So all you have to do is to access the methods of that class, just do global space WPDB, I mean $WPDB, and then you'll be able to access all the methods of the WPDB class using the arrow sign like I've done here. Okay, cool. So pretty much very useful functions, like your WPDB update updates the data into the database, inserts the data into database. One important point I'd like to highlight over here is that if you're using update and insert, these already escape the data for you, so you don't have to escape it separately. However, WPDB prepare statement, the job of this function is to uh, escape the data and give you your query statement. Okay, so you can pass a query statement and you will get the escaped query statement, and then we can use WP query and pass whatever is returned by this into it to insert or update or do whatever we want. So the point that you like to remember over here is that avoid using WPDB prepare, because it's a lengthy procedure. A more simpler way to just use WPDB insert or update, because they're already escaping the data for you. You don't have to use WPDB prepare separately to do it. So you will use WPDB prepare only in case we don't have access to these functions, which I don't think that should be the case. But just for information, that use insert and update the shorter methods for you. Okay. Cool. So I think that's pretty much it for this introduction bit. And in the next videos, we will go through these functions one by one with examples, and I'm going to show you how to use these functions. So I hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, please leave down the comment, and please subscribe and share this video. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye bye.